Ever feel like you're doing this teaching thing alone? You don't have to be. Shared teaching is all about sharing the workload through the power of collaboration and teamwork. Together, we'll walk through all the difficult parts of teaching and learn how to streamline our processes, fine-tune our time management, and develop a more manageable workload. If that sounds like a dream come true to you, then welcome to the Shared Teaching Podcast. Let's share in the teaching to make those dreams a reality. Now here's today's Shared Teaching. Hello and welcome back to the Shared Teaching Podcast. I'm your host, Susan, the creator behind Shared Teaching, and I'm so honored that you've chosen this podcast to come and join and learn from me. Before we get into today's episode, though, I have a quick message from my friends, Emily and Heidi. Take a listen.
Are you ready to have the most successful and stress-free back-to-school season ever?
We're Heidi and Emily from the Teacher Approved Podcast, and we are here to help with our free back-to-school mini audio course. In this 3-day private podcast, we will help you master your classroom procedures and routines, plan the perfect morning routine to start every day on the right foot, and learn how to use guided discovery to introduce your classroom materials. To sign up, head to secondstorywindow.net/BTS-mini.
We can't wait to help you find back-to-school success with our free mini audio course. And don't forget to come check us out on the Teacher Approved Podcast.
If you missed that link to sign up for Emily and Heidi's free training, don't worry, you can find it in today's show notes. Let's go ahead and start with today's episode. You are now listening to episode 85, Launching Writer's Workshop. Starting Writer's Workshop is probably the most important set of lessons you'll give during your writing time all school year. Launching the workshop is more about procedures and expectations than actually having students write. The first thing you want to do is define your workshop model. To launch your Writer's Workshop, let your students know what exactly a workshop is. If you're a fan of Daily 5, which I've talked about before, you want to share with your students what your writing time will look like, sound like, and feel like. I like to brainstorm with my class each of these sections on an anchor chart to refer back to them over the first few weeks of school. Separate from this lesson, I like to also have a lesson about our writing workshop roles. This is another idea that also comes from the Daily 5 book by the two sisters. So if you haven't gotten that book, I highly recommend it. And I do not have a link for it, but it is very easy to find on Amazon or wherever you like to purchase your books. As a class, we will discuss the teacher's job and their job as students. So you really want to break this down. What is your role going to look like during Writer's Workshop? Do you want them to know that you're going to be holding writing conferences and they need to kind of stay away like they might do in reading small group? Are you going to have more of a lecture style where you're talking, they're listening, maybe taking notes if you do a little bit upper elementary? Or just what in general is your job? And then what is the student's job? What should they do during lessons? What should they do during writing time? What should they be doing during share time? Of course, you're going to want to have multiple lessons on each component of these jobs later, especially when it comes to how to work with a partner. There's a whole slew of lessons within that you should probably be implementing in your classroom, especially if you teach younger students, second, first, even third grade. You really need to spell out your expectations. So make sure you have that chart, make sure it's very clear, and then go over it each time before you start your writing lessons. Just say, hey, let's remember our jobs. This is what my job's going to be today. This is what your job's going to be. And you don't have to read the whole chart, just read what pertains to that particular day. The second thing you want to do is practice using their supplies. I know that sounds kind of silly, especially if you think, hey, they've been in school for a while, they've had a few years under their belt. Each time they go to a different teacher, the expectations might be a little bit different. Maybe another teacher let them use fancy pens when they wrote, and you are all about they need a pencil so they can erase their mistakes. Or maybe it's the opposite. You want to use a pen, they've never used a pen before, so you need to kind of talk about the ground rules. Can they write on desks with it? Can they write just in their notebooks? When can they use these pens? Can they use them during math time? Be super clear, because that is what's going to alleviate a lot of the behaviors or nuisances that you might see during writing time that you thought to yourself, hey, they should have really known this. Maybe they just don't. You need to spell it out. And sometimes I kind of get forgetful brain over summer. I know I'm one of those people too. So just go over your expectations like they've never been in school before, and that should set you up for really good success. Now, when you're launching your writer's workshop, you need to set aside the time to teach them about their tools. In my own class, their tools consist of a writing notebook, a writing folder, pencils or blocky pens, which I don't usually roll out right away, but I will roll them out as I get a little bit more comfortable with them using the other supplies, blue pens and red pens. And those are for revising and editing, so I don't use those all the time. Depending on my students' attention and behavior, I might break this lesson up over several different days. I like to have my class practice getting and putting away their supplies a few times. Again, it might seem kind of silly, but at the beginning of the year, I'm looking to see how they follow directions and their speed. I'm sure you know, every minute of instruction counts. So the faster you can get them getting their supplies, returning back to their desk, or getting their supplies out of their desk, or finding them and being organized, it's going to cut down on the amount of time you're waiting for your students before you can begin your instruction time. Now, the first few weeks back to school, of course, are the perfect time to be practicing your expectations because you're practicing them for everything else in the classroom. So don't forget to practice them for writing time. Okay, the third thing you want to do then is to set up their notebooks. Now, after my students learn all about their expectations for writer's workshop and caring for our supplies, we will take a day to set up our writing notebooks. In my class, I use very thin composition notebooks that my school has purchased. So unfortunately, I don't have a fun link to share for where you can purchase them. I just know they got them from some kind of school supply center, I'm guessing. They're just super thin. Maybe they have less than 40 pages in them, and they fit really nicely inside their pronged notebook folders. Now, I like to have them have these notebooks because I use them just for planning. And then when we're doing our story writing, they write on loose leaf paper. So I really keep their ideas and their writing separate because I find it really helps them be more clear on the writing process when it's two totally separate things for each step of the process. So when they're going to plan, they get out their notebook. When they're going to write, they get a loose leaf sheet of paper. Now that's just me personally. If you want to use one notebook for both of those processes, then I'm recommending using some kind of tab to separate the notebook into sections. Okay, last but not least, when you're launching your writer's workshop is you want to have writing samples. So once your students are familiar with the model and how we use the supplies, you can start writing. And before I teach any lessons about how or what to write, I like to pre-assess my students by getting a writing sample. The reason I do this before any lessons is that I want to know what they were taught previously and what they remember after summer break. The first writing sample is going to tell me a lot about my new group of writers, and it's going to be invaluable when planning my writing lessons in the future. I can also use the writing samples to set individual writing goals. And you can learn more about how I set my writing goals in my podcast episode called Setting Student Learning Goals, which is episode number 35. Okay, so just a quick recap. When you're trying to launch Writer's Workshop at the beginning of the school year or any time really, you want to define the workshop model for your students. You want to have them practice using the supplies. Then you're going to set up their notebooks. And then you're going to take a writing sample to inform your future lessons. I hope you enjoyed this short episode and stay tuned for Saturday when an all-new bonus episode comes out for my Summer Spotlight series, which will end here in July. Thanks again, and I will see you next time. Bye for now. If you've loved this show, then join me in sharing the teaching,
hitting that subscribe button,
and leaving us a review on
iTunes,
so we can be found by more teachers like you who are ready to start sharing the workload. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Find new episodes each week on sharedteaching.com. Thanks for listening to the Shared Teaching Podcast.